It's a Friday afternoon in 1965. A police constable walks through the door of his three-bedroom semi-detached house, still in uniform, helmet under his arm. His wife is in the kitchen, the smell of a fry-up drifting down the hallway. He puts his wage packet on the table, a brown envelope sealed, untouched. She opens it, counts the notes, divides them up, rent, food, electric, a little bit into the savings tin on the mantelpiece, and there's still enough left for a pint on Saturday night. That policeman wasn't rich. He wasn't high-ranking. He was an ordinary beat constable, the lowest rank in the force, and yet he owned his house, ran a car, took his family on holiday once a year, and never once worried about how to feed his children. Today, a starting police constable earns around £30,000 a year, and they can't afford to buy a garage, let alone the house attached to it. So what changed? How did we go from a country where a bobby on the beat could live the full British dream to one where the same man would need a second job just to pay rent? This isn't just about police pay. This is the story of what Britain lost. Let's start with the money, because the numbers tell a story that's almost impossible to believe. In 1965, a police constable in a provincial force started on around £700 a year. After a few years of service, that climbed to around £1,000 to £1,100. In the Met, it was a bit more. But let's stick with the ordinary copper in an ordinary town. £1,000 a year. To modern ears, that sounds like pocket money, but the power of that money was staggering. The average working man in Britain earned around £800 to £900 a year, so a policeman was already earning above the national average, not by a fortune, but enough to feel comfortable, enough to feel secure. And here's the thing people forget. The policeman didn't just get a salary. He got a benefit that no longer exists for ordinary workers. A free house or a rent allowance. Police authorities were required by law to provide officers with either free quarters or an allowance in place of them. Read that again, required by law. The state housed its policemen. It was considered part of the deal, part of the social contract. You keep the streets safe, we'll put a roof over your head. Even without the police house, buying your own home was completely within reach. In the mid-1960s, the average house price in Britain was around £3,000 to £3,500. A decent three-bedroom semi in a respectable street in Birmingham, Leeds or Bristol. Not a palace, but solid, warm yours. A house cost roughly 2.5 to 3 times the average annual salary. Today, that ratio has exploded to 8 times, 9 times, even 12 times in London. The maths was simple back then. A constable earning £1,000 a year could buy a house worth £3,000. He would go to the local building society, not a faceless website, but a man behind a desk in the high street. He would sit down, they would talk. If he had a steady job and a clean record, the mortgage was approved. No algorithms, no credit scores, a handshake and a signature. The deposit? Maybe £200 to £300. Saved up over a couple of years from that brown envelope on the kitchen table. And once the mortgage was running, repayments were manageable. A few pounds a week. The family didn't starve to pay the building society. There was money left over. That's the bit that sounds like a fairy tale today. There was money left over. And with that leftover money, our constable could run a car. Not a flashy car. Nobody expected flashy. A second-hand Ford Anglia, perhaps, or a Morris Minor. Something reliable, something that got you from A to B and didn't cost the earth. In the mid-1960s, you could buy a decent used car for £100 to £200. Petrol was around 4 shillings and 9 pence a gallon. Road tax was £17 and 10 shillings a year. Insurance was a few pounds. For a working man, running a car was an affordable ambition, not a financial burden. That car meant everything. It meant the Sunday drive, packing the kids in the back, the flask of tea, the picnic blanket, the winding roads down to the coast or up to the hills. It meant independence. It meant the family wasn't trapped. The four-star smell, the crackle of the radio, the kids arguing in the back seat. That car was freedom, and a constable could afford it. Once a year, the family went on holiday. Not to Spain, not to a villa with a pool, to Butlins or Blackpool or a caravan park in Dorset, a week away from the beat, a week where the uniform stayed in the wardrobe and Dad was just Dad. A week at Butlins in the mid-60s cost around £15 to £20 for the whole family. Everything included: meals, entertainment, the lot. The Redcoats organised games for the kids. There was a swimming pool, a dance hall, knobbly knees competitions. It was loud, it was cheerful, it was enough. Or maybe the family drove to the coast, rented a caravan for a few pounds, fish and chips on the seafront. The kids with buckets and spades, sand in the sandwiches, rain on the windscreen. It didn't matter, it was a holiday, and a policeman could afford one, not because he was special, because that's how the country worked. But let's talk about the job itself, because the Bobby in the 1960s lived a life that has completely vanished. He walked. That's the first thing to understand. He walked to beat, the same streets, every shift. He didn't sit in a car staring at a computer. He was on foot, in the community, visible. He knew the shopkeepers by name. He knew which kids were trouble and which ones just needed a clip round the ear and a word with their dad. He knew which old lady lived alone and needed checking on. He was part of the neighborhood, not a stranger passing through in a patrol car. Do you remember Dixon of Dock Green? Evening all. Jack Warner played the Bobby everyone wished lived on their street. That wasn't entirely fiction. There were real George Dixons on every high street in Britain. The constable who'd stop and chat, who'd help carry your shopping, who'd give a lad a thick ear for scrumping apples instead of dragging him to the station. The relationship between the police and the public was built on proximity. He lived among the people he policed. He drank in the same pub. His children went to the same school. That closeness wasn't a weakness. It was the entire point. When the Bobby knew his patch, crime stayed low, not through fear, but through familiarity. Here's perhaps the most striking difference. The constable's wife didn't need to work. One wage was enough. She could stay home, raise the children, run the house, not because women weren't capable of working, but because the economics of the 1960s meant a single salary could support a family. Think about that for a moment. Today, most households need 2 full incomes just to cover the basics. Mortgage, bills, childcare, food, both parents working flat out and still feeling skint at the end of the month. In the 60s, a beat constable's wage alone covered the house, the car, the food, the holiday, and the savings tin on the mantelpiece. One job, one salary, a whole family supported. So what happened? How did we get from there to here? The answer isn't simple, but the broad strokes are painfully clear. Housing. In the 1960s, houses cost 2.5 times the average salary. Councils were building hundreds of thousands of homes a year. The country built over 400,000 new homes in a single year in the late 1960s. Supply kept up with demand. Prices stayed sane. Then we stopped building. Council housing dried up. Right to buy sold off the stock without replacing it. Foreign investors poured money into British property. Buy-to-let landlords hoovered up family homes and rented them back to the people who couldn't afford to buy them. Today, the average house costs nearly 9 times the average salary. The same house that our constable bought for £3,000 in 1965 might cost £300,000 today. His salary has gone up roughly 30-fold. The house has gone up 100-fold. The mathematics broke. And it wasn't just housing. The free police house disappeared. The rent allowance was scrapped for officers joining after 1994. The social contract that said we'll house you if you serve quietly vanished. Pensions were cut. Benefits were trimmed. The deal that made the job worthwhile was hollowed out piece by piece. There's something else that changed, something harder to measure than wages and house prices. Respect. In the 1960s, the policeman was a figure of authority in the community, not feared but respected. Children were told to go to the policeman if they were lost. Shopkeepers valued the bobby walking past. Parents trusted him. The uniform meant something. The helmet was a symbol. When a constable walked down your street, you felt safer. You didn't film him on your phone. You didn't shout abuse. You said good morning, and he said it back. That mutual respect wasn't enforced. It was earned. Earned by the fact that the bobby lived on your street, sent his kids to your school, and drank in your pub. He wasn't a stranger in a stab vest. He was a neighbor in a helmet. Let's be honest. The 1960s weren't perfect. The pay was modest, the work was hard, and the hours were long. Nobody's pretending it was paradise. But the fundamental deal was better. A man could do an honest job, an important job, a job that kept people safe, and in return he could afford a home, a car, and a week at the seaside with his family. He didn't need a degree. He didn't need a second income. He didn't need to choose between heating and eating. Today, we ask police officers to risk their lives for a wage that won't cover a deposit on a flat. We took away their housing. We stripped their pensions. We removed the respect. And then we wonder why recruitment is in crisis. The 1960s constable wasn't rich, but he was comfortable, secure, and valued. He walked his beat knowing that his family was warm, his home was his own, and his future was safe. That's not a luxury. That should be the bare minimum for anyone who serves the public. But we lost it. Somewhere between then and now, we decided that the people who protect us don't deserve the same deal their grandfathers had. And that might be the biggest crime of all. If you remember the bobby on the beat, the police house on the corner, or the days when one wage was enough, share this with someone who'll understand. Subscribe to keep these stories alive, and drop a comment telling me, what do you miss most about the Britain you grew up in? I read every single one.